I was almost killed over an Amazon Echo Dot. Once, I was renting a house in a middle-class neighborhood in California about 2 years ago. This stranger came up to my door and knocks. I answer, and this older dude with a scruffy mustache and a seething angry scalp greets me at my door. He immediately accuses me of stealing his Amazon package. How could I have stolen his package? I was at a white-collar job all day and had just come home half an hour ago. He questions me about why I don't have an Amazon doorbell with the camera on it. I explain that it's a rented house and then I didn't want to damage the house by mounting one, which is understandably a mildly bizarre reason not to have one, but is also equally bizarre that I am required to have one. He tells me that he got a picture from Amazon with the picture of the package being at my door. At this point, I can notice this man is visibly and obviously intoxicated. It was only 6 p.m. and the sun had not even set, and I was confused as to how this man had gotten himself so drunk he could barely stand up straight. There also happens to be a few empty Amazon boxes in my entryway that were about to go into the garbage, as I do also order from Amazon. He accuses me of stealing the package and keeping it to myself. I said I did no such thing. He was getting loud and bellicose at this point. He said to give him his package or else suffer dire consequences. I closed the door, assuring him it would be dealt with. I asked my wife at the time if she's seen a package addressed to someone else. She said she didn't know if it was for us or not, but she put the package in the den. I go to the den, it's not there. Now at this point I'm confused. I ask her about it and she says she's positive she put it there a few hours ago. I just wanted this to go away, so I just did what most rational people would do, and I go to the man in the front and say we don't have a package and that he should call Amazon and get the item replaced for free. He then proceeds to pull a pistol on me and points it at my face. He says he's tired of having his shit stolen, pushes me with all his might into my house. He is a heavy-set man and I was tall and scrawny at the time with a gun in my face, so I back down. I tell my wife to call 911 and she does. All while frantically searching for this package she swears she had placed down. The worst thought in my head is that my daughter was upstairs and that I would at least stop him from going upstairs. I blocked the foyer from entry to the second story, and at this point my daughter comes out of her room hearing the commotion and sees this scene. Starts screaming and crying. At this point I am in panic mode. If you have ever been in a situation where you are locked into a physical altercation with the threat of life or death, you will know what I'm talking about. I can start hearing police sirens. Thank God, there must have been a cop in the area, which is unusual because we are living in middle-class suburbia. While looking for any improvised weapons I can use if this man starts to go upstairs. I ask her if she's seen an Amazon package. Understandably, she is too distraught and upset to be reasoned with. This dude is unfazed by the approaching sirens and tells me I better give him what's fucking his. I'm thinking I'm a dead man because he has his finger on the trigger ready to shoot me. My wife gets in between me and the stairway and goes up to protect our daughter. She goes in her room and about 20 seconds later throws a small package down the stairs with an open Amazon Echo Dot box with nothing in it. Me and the man made eye contact and we both had realized roughly what had happened. The man then lowered his gun and had the most defeated and distraught look on his face. He put away his gun, turned away and started walking to his house. At this moment the police pulled up and had a description and told the man to put his hands up. And the police confronted him and he surrendered and tried to talk his way out of it. He was immediately put into the back of a cop car. Apparently he had a long history with alcohol abuse and domestic violence. Apparently he was not even supposed to be in possession of a firearm in his situation in my state. The package had obviously delivered to the wrong address 2 houses away. My daughter's 10th birthday was coming up and she likes gadgets, and she came upon the package and opened it, which I let her do because hey, why not, it's fun for kids to open packages. Saw the Amazon Echo and assumed it was a birthday present for her. I now stay armed with 2 shotguns and revolver in my gun safe inside a locked armoire in my dining room. There is not a day that goes by that I don't think about it. I was almost shot over a misdelivered package and a fucking Amazon Echo Dot. Sometimes an unbelievable lie is better than an ugly truth. At least that's what I tell myself to make nights easier. You see, I was never given the luxury of ever finding out what the truth was and have come to terms I never will. I want to reminisce one last time of what happened back at Fort Mel. I want to remember before I put everything to rest, and I want to share it with you. But be warned, what you may think may never happen, and what you believe may not be real, but none of it matters because this story will never have an end. It's hard to explain the appeal of Fort Mall for those who've never been. For me, it would be like describing the color purple to someone who is blind. It's impossible. But if I had to try, it was almost like a nostalgic dream you just remembered you had forgotten. It was 2014 when me and my daughter, Maria, moved to the town of Fort Mall. It was small, quiet, and a good distraction for her. She needed it after her dad died, so I thought a change of scenery would do her good. And fortunately, this was the answer we had been looking for. I bought a 2-story house on the outskirts of town at a cheap price, 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and just us two. We were surrounded with fresh air, nature, and enough to do to entertain Maria. To us, this wasn't just Fort Mall, it was home. Integrating into society wasn't challenging either. Locals were welcoming, so much so I was convinced I had known these people my whole life. Along the way, I had befriended one of our neighbors, the Shermans, for the sole purpose Maria could at least make a friend before school starts. Thankfully, they had a daughter, Carol, who was also 9 years old. "So did your dad really die?" Carol asked between mouthfuls of her cucumber sandwich. "Carol," Sarah screeched. Carol peered at her mom with childlike naivety. "That's not nice." "It's all right." I turned to Carol as she was still busy feasting on her sandwich and explained that he was indeed dead. She slowly nodded, acknowledging the reality, meanwhile brushing the strands of her blonde hair that crept into her mouth. "I want to climb the tree." Maria leapt up off of the picnic blanket. "Come on, Carol, we're going." "Does this mean your family is cursed?" "Yeah, so what? What are you going to do about it?" Maria retorted, "Now hurry up before I curse you." Carol scrambled to her feet and followed after Maria as they headed to the nearby willow. "Sorry about that, Diane. I told her not to bring it up since it would upset Maria." "Don't worry about it." "Anyway, how's she doing?" Sarah questioned. "A lot better. She's talking more." I carefully watched Maria climb on the tree, followed by Carol as they made their way up to where Carol's older brother, Jake, was. "By the way, thanks for setting up this picnic." "It's no big deal," Sarah shrugged while reaching for another brownie. "It's the least I can do, but trust me when I say this, Diane, moving here was the best decision you could have ever made." Our attentions quickly turned to children once more. Carol was struggling to catch up to where Maria was, though Maria didn't seem to notice as she was occupied arguing with Jake. A bit of a screaming match ensued between them as he refused to have Maria climb any further, yet she was having none of it. I don't understand how they enjoy climbing trees. I don't have the energy to. Also, if you don't mind me asking, what happened to husband? You don't have to answer if you don't want to, it's just curiosity got the better of me. I let out a defeating sigh. It's fine, I don't mind talking about it. One day he just got a sudden heart attack while he was taking care of Maria, and when I got home it was too late. Oh, that's awful. That must have been traumatic for her. Sarah scrunched her face, probably imagining if that happened to her kids. Yeah, I think a part of her blames herself for it. I quickly changed the subject as I could tell the topic was too grim to have on such a nice day. By the way, I was thinking of doing a little dinner over our house this week and I would like to invite you and the family, I said. Oh, Diane, that sounds wonderful. She smiled delightfully. But we're pretty busy this week. Some other time? Ah! Maria screamed as she fell from a branch. A deafening thud erupted when she reached the ground. I dashed to her side with only noticing a scrape on her knee to be the most concerning injury. Is she okay? Sarah ran over out of breath. Yes, she's fine. Thank God it's just a scrape. Carol and Jake quickly climbed down, Carol looking worried and Jake trying his hardest not to seem guilty. I should take her home. Thank you for everything. I carried her in my arms all the way to the car after exchanging our farewells, though from Carol's crumpled expression with paint-tainted cheeks and Maria's meek wave told me that was the last thing they wanted. Jake is such a prick, Maria screeched once we drove off. He pushed me off the tree just 'cause I wouldn't listen to him. He's the absolute worst. I'm sure he didn't mean to push you, it was probably just an accident. Whatever you say, I still hate him, she whispered under her breath. What about Carol? She speaks her mind too much, but she's nice enough. "Do you know I can met her again?" she asked. "Soon enough," I grinned. Maria couldn't help but grin as well while doing a little jig in her seat when she thought I wasn't looking. Also, Jake said something really weird to me up in the tree. "Oh, what?" He said that we were climbing the Weeping Woman's tree, and if you go there at night, if you're lucky, you hear her faintly weeping but never go towards the sound, and in the morning never climb to the top of the tree because she hates people touching it, and if you do, the last thing you'll see is the Weeping Woman right before she snaps your neck. Sounds to me like he's got a crush on you. You, Mom, seriously, gross. Maria shouted while covering her ears. What? I'm just saying he was probably trying to get your attention. Maria rolled her eyes in disbelief. But Jake aside, I promise you, you're going to love it here. And true to my word, our love for Fort Mal grew. I mean, how could anyone not have loved it? Even from a few days, Maria changed just in a blink of an eye, and soon enough she was back to her old self. We had also grown closer to the Shermans. I discovered, beyond first impressions, Sarah Sherman was an undeniable ray of sunshine that cared deeply about family and strangers equally. She'd talk your ears off until she lost her breath, you'd never leave her house hungry, and being friends with her was effortless. Unlike Richard Sherman, he was a man of few words, and if he could, he wouldn't talk at all. He hated the company of others, and rather preferred solitude. Honestly, there wasn't much to say about him since the times we'd visit the house he'd disappear into his study, or, on rare occasions, briefly converse with me. Though strangely, from our conversations, even when he said so little, it seemed he knew a lot. Jake Sherman, on the other hand, required many of his mother's traits mixed with the rebellious nature of a 12-year-old boy. As well-mannered as he was, his itch for chaos caused him to get into trouble often, most times with Maria. And I prayed for them to get along. Unfortunately, that would never be the case due to their stubborn, headstrong personalities, unlike her relationship with Carol. Carol was a curious girl who had endless questions. Maria craved adventure and would take them places so Carol could ask all the questions she wanted, while Maria would confidently answer them. To a fault, Carol was gullible and Maria enjoyed lying, however their dynamic oddly worked. Most days were spent at their home where Carol and Maria would be with themselves, and on occasion, Jake would join upstairs where they'd talk amongst themselves about who knows what. Though their muffled whispers would be drowned out by Sarah and I obnoxious laughter, as we talked about anything and everything. And when we were with them, it was just us two at home doing whatever we wished. The days were short and weeks long when we were together. One activity we enjoyed was putting on shadow puppet plays. We'd clear a space in the living room, draw the blinds, and shine a lamp on a wall, although us both were awful at creating basic shapes that we instead created our own. Maria's favorite was Piaroof, a hybrid of a cat and a dog, which was debatable, though mine was Mr. Squiggles, a squiggly man, and often we'd argue which was better. We disagreed on quite a few things. One most notable was the supposed rotting smell coming from the wall we used to put on our shows. Maria insisted that it smelled like something had died, yet every time I went over I smelled nothing. However, her persistence was ripe and, not long after, I hired an exterminator to come check it out. And just as I had suspected, he claimed that there were no dead animals inside or around the vicinity. I was victorious and Maria was not pleased with his assumptions. No matter how hard I tried to convince her there was nothing there, she wouldn't budge, and our shadow puppet show came to an end while we moved on. One day Sarah had invited us to Nellie Bay Park on the weekend. It was a fairly big area by a cliff where many mothers would go to socialize and have their kids play on the nearby playground. There I meet one of Sarah's friend, Kelly Carmen, and her two kids, Lily and Ben. Lily had a fierce gaze that perfectly fitted with her long umber hair and confidently introduced herself. Ben, on the other hand, was quite scrawny for his age, mostly skin and bones, and clung to his sister like she would disappear if he were to let go. A simple wave was what he gave before the two ran over to the other children. Maria and Carol took a liking to the Carmen kids, mostly due to them all being the same age, but Jake could care less. "Jake, please don't fight with Maria," Sarah pleaded with him. "Well then tell her to stop being such a bitch," he answered back. "Jake." "It's all right, Mrs. Sherman, at least I'm not an immature asshole." Maria swiftly ran away before he got the last say. Sarah sighed as they began to fight on their way to the swing set, followed by Carol and the Carmens. Will they ever get along? Sarah wondered. Give it time, I attempted to reassure her as they began to tackle each other to the ground. Lots of time. She chuckled in agreeance. Oh, before I forget, I turned to Sarah. I want to do a movie night for the kids over at ours for next weekend. Does that work for you? I'm really sorry we can't. Richard's parents are coming over for the weekend, so we're gonna be pretty busy. She apologized. It's fine, I shyly smiled. Recently Sarah was a bit worse for wear. It didn't ruin her spurt as she had no problem being her bubbly self, but no matter how much she talked it didn't hide her gaunt appearance. I wished to ask if she was all right, however, I could tell that was the last thing she wanted to be asked. On the bright side, today was fairly busy with the sounds of mother's gossip and kids' squeals filling the air. On the swings Maria pushed Carol back and forth. Meanwhile Jake was on the seesaw with one of his friends, not wanting to deal with them. Stop moving, Lily slapped away her brother's hand as she threw piles of sand on top of him. In the nearby sandpit she continuously put clumps of sand until a hill sat upon his stomach. Peculiar shapes were engraved on top with various pebbles and leaves scattered in certain spots. Lily, there's sand getting in my eye. Get it out, he demanded. Well, maybe if you didn't move so much it wouldn't be there. She used the end of her pink jacket sleeve to gently swipe away the grains. Now stop complaining, it's almost over. She leaned in to whisper something in his ear, and in one big scoop she removed him from his sandy tomb. There, you're fine now. He patted down his clothes, removing anything else she may have missed, and skipped on his merry way. Yet before she could go play, someone had approached her. A girl, wide-eyed with pursed lips, opened her hand to reveal something to Lily, and whatever was in her hand made Lily's face distort into the same expression as hers. He came? Her voice cracked. The girl slowly nods. Lily scrambled to her feet and ventured off in a quickened pace. Kelly eavesdropped on their conversation. What? The crooked man, she quietly said. The crooked what? Well, they believe there's a crooked man who has his crooked ways, and he lurks around here blending into all the crooked trees. They say if you try and touch the broken bench he leaves surprises for you to find. Sarah pointed directly to a bench far across the playing grounds where no one dared get close to. It's a tale you hear about when you're young, Kelly interjected. What? I laughed in pure amazement. Who made it up? Sarah shrugged. Who would spread this awful lie amongst children? I wondered, bewildered and slightly furious. I mean, honestly, the crooked man? Who would believe that? Trust me, it's easy to believe, Kelly softly explained. But it's nothing to worry about, Dash. A scream ripped through the playground coming from within the red slide. Everyone rushed to see what the commotion was about and witnessed blood running down Ben's leg. Repeatedly he said no, over and over as tears streamed down his face. All down his thigh, thumbtacks were sunk deep within his skin. Kelly drew him close, comforting him in her arms as he whimpered in pain, the tears falling off his cheek rapidly as the noise got quieter. I ran over to Maria, shielding her from the sight as she trembled in my embrace. Frantically I glanced around the crowd that had formed, with their gaze no longer on Ben. Mothers gripped their kids as they whispered in fear. Silence fell upon us all as everyone looked back at the broken bench as it stared back at us. On the car ride home, Maria confessed Ben had touched the bench. She had dared him, saying if he didn't he was a pussy. I didn't think it was real. She burst into tears. I didn't know you would get hurt. She wept in the palms of her hands. Darling, I pulled the car over. You listen to me here. None of this was your fault. Some sick person put thumbtacks at the bottom of the slide. It was not you. But Mom, we all saw him. Who? The crooked man, she croaked. I did everything I could to calm her, yet persistent was all I got back. She was convinced she saw a crooked man in the woods with a crooked smile who punished poor Ben for touching a bench. I filed a police report which was denied since I didn't have a clear description of who the crooked man was, and that they would conduct an investigation only if Mrs. Carmen filed for child endangerment. She never did, but once she discovered I went to the police she gave me a mouthful of everything under the sun. That was the last time I ever spoke to her. When night came, Maria went to the wall, and what felt like an eternity she walked away happy. And as horrific as the incident was, it quickly was forgotten, and Nellie Bay Park was still full with families, including the Shermans. Although we never went back. We never brought up that incident, thinking the worst was far behind us. But I would slowly find out that would be the least of my worries. I forgot to mention, after the death of my husband, Maria had difficulty sleeping at night. Trust me when I say I tried everything to fix the issue, however, nothing seemed to work. And so, I gave her the freedom to do whatever she wanted as long as it would help her fall asleep. Ever since we moved to the house, every night she'd be downstairs for hours, though I never questioned it since it worked, but I still found it to be quite odd. I wouldn't hear the TV playing or her reading a book out loud. There was always silence. One day, at midnight, I headed to the kitchen for a glass of water, when in the darkness, I was greeted with the sight of my dear Maria, wide-eyed, on the living room floor, with her ear pressed against the wall. Shit. My heart dropped. Darling, what are you doing? I questioned, though she didn't respond nor acknowledge my question. Her eyes beamed in the dark, while she was occupied with the wall. Maria? Maria. I crouched beside her, gently tapping her shoulder. Mom, she gasped. What are you doing here? Getting something to drink. But, sweetie, what are you doing in the dark? Shhhhhhh, she pressed her finger against her lips. I'm listening, she quietly spoke. Listening? To what? Perplexed at what she was implying. Mom, do you not hear it? The walls, they whisper. Maria motioned me to listen, in which I did not, wanting to reject her request. However, just as I predicted, on the other side was nothing. Do you hear it? I questioned whether or not I should go along with her little charade, but decided to as I reluctantly nodded, as I assumed any second she would say it was a prank, yet no, she beamed with pure excitement. Afterwards, she gently placed her ear back against the wall, holding on to the same gleeful smile. Come on, I think you should go to bed now, I interjected. How about you read me one of your stories? Maria hesitantly rose to her feet while I gripped her hand, leading her upstairs, far from whatever that was. As quiet as the wall was, an unspeakable dread began to brew within me. Out of curiosity, on the stairs I asked Maria why the walls whisper. Cheerfully she explained, well, Carol told me once that our house was the dead men's den, where dead men go to confess their sins, and if we don't leave we'll be cursed to have everyone we love die or be killed by the hands of the men. And of course I didn't believe her at first until I tried it, but Maria, I cut her off. You shouldn't believe everything you hear, I calmly state, trying to mask how freaked I was. But Mom, you said you believed me even when I knew you were lying. What? I stopped at the entrance of her room. It's all right, if you don't believe me. When you put your ear to the wall, they weren't talking to you, maybe one day they will. Before I got the chance to say anything else, she said goodnight and closed the door right afterwards. After that, little by little I noticed how consumed she was by the walls. Every night I'd slip downstairs to check up on her, and there she'd be listening to what they had to say as they whispered about stuff I'd never get the chance to learn about. Sure, it was terrifying, but it was harmless at first, so I decided to ignore it. You see, at the time I believed that certain things happen for a reason. Some people come into your life to teach you a valuable life lesson, and sometimes we go through hardships to help us grow. I like to tell myself that what happened was for a good reason, as comfort to heal from the pain. And yet, looking back, I wish I had stopped it sooner, because that was only the beginning. I got accepted in a high-paying job. The rules are terrifying. I don't know why I took this job. For a little bit of background, my name is Kingston. This takes place about a good 5 years ago, when I was 19. I was struggling with financial problems, and my family members were either dying, distant, or just went no contact. I only have my brother now, but he isn't a part of this story. I was sitting in my room, looking for jobs, as usual, since I was in desperate need of one. The hum of the computer fan filled the dimly lit room as I scrolled through job listings, desperation clawing at my chest with each passing minute. Unemployment had become a suffocating weight, crushing my dreams and draining my savings. But then, like a beacon of hope in the darkness, I stumbled upon an ad that seemed almost too good to be true. Immediate hire, $39 per hour, no experience necessary, the listing proclaimed in bold letters. My heart skipped a beat as I read the words, hope flickering to life within me like a flame in the darkness. It was the lifeline I had been searching for, a chance to escape the suffocating grip of financial ruin and reclaim control over my life. With trembling hands, I clicked on the listing and filled out the application, my fingers flying across the keyboard as I poured my hopes and dreams into the digital form. The questions were standard fare, name, contact information, employment history, but with each click of the mouse, the weight of my desperation grew heavier, a silent plea echoing in every keystroke. I hit submit with a sense of trepidation, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on me like a leaden blanket. What if it was all a hoax? What if I had just wasted precious minutes of my dwindling time chasing after a dream that would never materialize? But as the minutes stretched into hours and the sun dipped below the horizon, an email appeared in my inbox, illuminating the darkness with its promise of possibility. "Congratulations," it read, the words dancing across the screen like a beacon of hope. "You have been selected for an interview. Please report to the following address tomorrow evening for orientation." Excitement surged through me like electricity, sparking a fire within my soul that had long lain dormant. Tomorrow evening couldn't come soon enough. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, my luck was finally about to change. As the sun dipped below the horizon and darkness descended upon the city, I allowed myself to dream of a future filled with possibility. I just didn't realize the job I had applied for would lead me down a path far darker and more sinister than I could have ever imagined. As Alex handed me the sheet of paper, my fingers shook slightly with anticipation and dread. I unfolded it, revealing a long list of rules written in stark black ink. My eyes scanned the page, each rule sending a chill down my spine. Rule number 1, I read aloud, my voice trembling slightly. "Survive until 6 a.m. The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of their implication. Rule number 2, monitor the cameras for any anomalies. Rule number 3, no leaving the basement until the shift ends. I glanced up at Alex, my eyes pleading for some reassurance, but his expression remained stoic and unreadable. Rule number 4, at 2:25 a.m., check under the bed for any entities. Rule number 5, if you hear scratching at the door, do not open it, I continued, my voice growing hoarse with each word. The rules seemed to stretch on endlessly, each one more ominous than the last. Rule number 6, at 4:45 a.m., you may go to bed, but be sure to set an alarm for 5:55 a.m. to ensure you wake up in time, I read, relief flooding through me at the thought of a few precious moments of sleep before the night's end. Rule number 7, if you hear laughter echoing through the halls, do not investigate, I continued, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end as I imagined the sinister sound ringing in my ears. As I reached the end of reading rule number 7, a sense of unease settled in the pit of my stomach. "Well, of course I won't investigate," I muttered under my breath, a nervous chuckle escaping my lips. Rule number 8, do not let the clock strike midnight. The consequences, time will warp and distort, causing your body to age rapidly before your very eyes, leaving you a withered husk of your former self. The rules kept getting more confusing. How was I supposed to do this? Rule number 9, if you see a figure standing in the shadows, do not make eye contact. Rule number 10, if you feel a sudden drop in temperature, hide immediately and stay quiet. Rule number 11, if you hear your name whispered in the darkness, do not respond. Rule number 12, if you encounter a mirror, do not look into it. Rule number 13, if you see a door that wasn't there before, do not open it, I continued. Rule number 14, if you hear footsteps echoing through the halls, do not investigate. Rule number 15, if you feel a sudden sense of dread, trust your instincts and seek safety. Rule number 16, if you encounter a staircase leading downward, do not descend. Rule number 17, if you see a shadow move out of the corner of your eye, do not turn to look. Rule number 18, if you hear music playing from an unknown source, cover your ears and run. Rule number 19, if you encounter a locked window, do not attempt to escape. Rule number 20, if you hear a voice beckoning you to follow, do not heed its call. Rule number 21, if you feel a sudden sense of being watched, do not turn around. Rule number 22, if you encounter a door marked exit, do not believe it, I read, my heart sinking as the realization dawned that there was no escape from this nightmarish labyrinth. Rule number 23, if you see a clock ticking backwards, Close your eyes and count to 10. Rule number 24. If you hear the sound of children laughing, do not be fooled, they are not children. As I reached the second to last rule, my hands grasped on the paper. Rule number 25. If you see yourself reflected in a mirror, do not trust what you see, for in this place, nothing is as it seems. Then, the last rule. I don't even know anymore. As I took a deep breath to steady my nerves, a new sense of dread washed over me. My eyes scanned the list of rules once more, searching for any additional guidance in the face of the of Alex. Rule number 26. The rules will change every night. Stay vigilant and adapt to survive. My heart skipped a beat as I read the ominous words, a chill creeping down my spine. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. Not only was I trapped in this nightmarish scenario, but the very rules meant to guide me were in constant flux. As Alex left the basement, his footsteps echoing faintly in the distance, I was left alone in the dimly lit room. The weight of the rules pressed down on me like a leaden cloak, their ominous warnings echoing in my mind. As the night wore on, the tension in the air became palpable, thick with the promise of unseen horrors lurking in the darkness. I glanced nervously at the monitors, my heart pounding in my chest as I searched for any signs of movement. Suddenly, the lights overhead began to flicker, casting erratic shadows that danced across the walls of the basement. I froze, my breath catching in my throat as I watched the flickering lights, a sense of unease creeping over me like a suffocating fog. Then, without warning, the monitors flickered to life, each screen displaying a different scene of horror and despair. I gasped in horror as I saw images of twisted faces leering out from the darkness, their eyes burning with an otherworldly light. I tried to look away, to tear my eyes from the horrifying images that filled the screens before me, but I found myself unable to move, transfixed by the sheer terror of what I was witnessing. As the images continued to flicker and distort, a sense of overwhelming dread washed over me, threatening to consume me whole. I knew I had to break free from the mesmerizing hold of the monitors, to find a way to escape the nightmarish visions that surrounded me. With a desperate effort, I tore my gaze away from the screens, squeezing my eyes shut against the onslaught of horror. I reached blindly for the flashlight, its reassuring weight a lifeline in the darkness as I struggled to regain control of my rapidly unraveling mind. As I scanned through the list of rules, a creeping sense of dread washed over me. Each directive seemed more ominous than the last, warning of dire consequences for the slightest misstep. But with a job offer this lucrative, I couldn't afford to back out now. As the night wore on, the silence of the abandoned hospital weighed heavily on my shoulders. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of the lights, sent shivers down my spine. I kept a vigilant eye on the monitors, scanning for any signs of the entity's presence. At 2:25 a.m., a chill swept through the room, causing my breath to hitch in my throat. I looked at the monitor, my blood turning to ice as I saw a dark figure materialize under the bed in one of the rooms. It moved with unnatural grace, its eyes gleaming with malice as it reached out with elongated fingers. Terrified, I froze, unsure of what to do. I knew I had to follow the rules, but every fiber of my being screamed at me to run. With trembling hands, I reached for the intercom, my voice barely above a whisper as I called out for help. But there was no response, only the oppressive silence of the empty hospital. As the entity drew closer, its presence suffocating, I realized with horror that I had broken one of the rules, but which one? With my heart pounding in my chest, I frantically searched the rule sheet for any guidance on how to handle this situation. But as I scanned the list, a sinking feeling settled in the pit of my stomach. There was no mention of what to do if an entity appeared under the bed. Desperation clawed at my mind as I racked my brain for a solution. Should I try to confront the entity? Or would that only anger it further? I glanced around the room, searching for anything that could help me escape this nightmare. But before I could formulate a plan, the entity's eyes locked onto mine, sending a jolt of fear coursing through my veins. It seemed to sense my hesitation, feeding off my terror like a predator toying with its prey. With a surge of adrenaline, I made a split-second decision and bolted for the door, my heart pounding in my ears as I sprinted down the hallway. But no matter how fast I ran, the entity was always one step behind me, its malevolent presence pressing down on me like a suffocating weight. As I reached the stairwell, I stumbled and fell, the impact knocking the wind out of me. Gasping for breath, I struggled to my feet and continued my desperate flight, knowing that my only chance of survival lay in reaching the safety of the outside world. But just as I reached the exit, a bone-chilling laugh echoed through the halls, freezing me in my tracks. I turned to see the entity looming behind me, its twisted form silhouetted against the dim light of the moon. With a final burst of adrenaline, I flung open the door and stumbled out into the night, the cold air hitting me like a slap in the face. But even as I fled into the darkness, I knew that the entity would always be there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. And as I ran, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had only just begun to uncover the true horrors of this abandoned hospital. My breath came in ragged gasps as I stumbled through the deserted streets, the echoes of the entity's laughter ringing in my ears like a relentless taunt. I dared not look back, fearing that its twisted form would materialize behind me at any moment. Every shadow seemed to conceal a lurking threat, every flicker of movement sending a jolt of panic coursing through my veins. I knew I had to find safety, to escape the clutches of the entity that had haunted my every step since I set foot in that accursed hospital. But as I rounded a corner, my heart sank at the sight of another dark figure looming in the distance. It stood motionless, its silhouette blending seamlessly with the shadows, as if it were waiting for me to approach. Fear surged through me like a tidal wave, threatening to overwhelm my senses and drag me down into the abyss of despair. But I refused to surrender to the darkness, to let the entity claim me as its prey. Summoning every ounce of courage I possessed, I forced myself to continue forward, each step a battle against the paralyzing grip of terror. The figure remained still, its presence a looming specter that filled me with a sense of impending doom. As I drew closer, the figure began to take shape, its features twisted and contorted into a grotesque mockery of humanity. Its eyes gleamed with malice, sending a shiver of revulsion down my spine. With a surge of adrenaline, I veered off course and ducked into a nearby alleyway, hoping to lose my pursuer in the labyrinth of narrow streets. But no matter how hard I tried to shake it, the entity remained hot on my heels, its presence a constant reminder of the horrors that lurked in the darkness. Desperation clawed at my mind as I raced through the maze of alleys, each twist and turn bringing me closer to the edge of sanity. But still, I refused to give up hope, to let the entity snuff out the flicker of light that burned within me. And as I disappeared into the shadows, a single thought echoed in my mind: I may have escaped the hospital, but the entity would always be waiting, lurking in the darkness, ready to claim its next victim. And until I found a way to break free from its grasp, I would never know true peace again. 5 minutes. That was how much longer I had to wait before that hour dawned before me. 5 more minutes. Any typical man could use that time for something wiser. They could wash their dishes, read a chapter or two from their favorite book, or listen to the declining economy within their country on their favorite news network. That is what one could do in that short amount of time, but I am not one that could be considered typical. I prefer sharpening my knife in those 5 minutes. Either that or I find myself cleaning any tool I have used the night before, as they always get dirty after the job is done. Perhaps I might also search throughout the garage for the next tool I wish to use. The tools are all so similar if analyzed, yet they always offered a different result. Some knives offer shallow wounds, while others result in deep ones. There are also some that are sturdy enough to crack a skull in a single bash, and some that require multiple hits. Either way, the tools always got the job done, and that is all that matters. When did this behavior start? Around May, if I can recall precisely. Yes, that was when. It was in that fateful month that my family was murdered by that man. It was intentional, of course, and there were neither reasons nor causes as to why he did it. It was just something he thought about doing and did so. He didn't steal anything, nor did he derive pleasure from it. He simply did it and knew the consequences that would come along with it. His name was Norman Adams. He graduated from high school with no difficulty, attended a common business university, found a steady job, and met an average-looking woman that he planned to someday make his wife. Norman also had a schedule he always stuck to. He woke up at 6:30. Afterwards, he prepares himself, eats his breakfast, which consists of an omelet and a cup of orange juice, prepares his lunch, and arrives at work at exactly 7:30. He finishes at 1600 hours, goes back home, washes his dishes, works out, takes a hot shower, and then goes to bed. Overall, a typical man with a typical schedule is living what seems to be a typical life. Yet, it was all due to this normality that fascinated the media. They asked him questions as though he were the goddamn president, even though Norman never gave them a single answer. Oh, and the audacity of this man. In his last few days, he was playing the role of a man who regretted his actions and who wished to apologize to me. I could never accept it. What is that apology's value? Nothing. It can't bring back the dead, nor can it help me financially. Just simple words that even parrots can mimic. As such, I always turned my back when he attempted to do so. Even on the day of his execution. I could only look at him when the electric chair was turned on. It wasn't a pleasant way to go, to say the least. Especially when the electric chair is well known for the inhumane accidents that may occur in some instances. Well, who cares if it's humane or not when the result is the same? Right? Norman Adams was later buried in some shithole of a place with a grave I made sure would never ever be constructed. That is what monsters like him deserve. Even in death, peace should never be granted to them. Then why? You may be asking. Why am I the one who is preparing to kill? Well, my dear subconscious, Norman Adams will be arriving in exactly 3 minutes. How so? Isn't he dead? Believe me when I say that I, too, would be astonished by the current predicament I find myself in, but yes, Norman Adams is dead. It's been a year since his death. His body should have rotted into a disgusting mush by now or, God knows, perhaps been eaten by maggots. As if I were to care what happened to him, all I know is that he comes to me every evening at exactly 8 p.m., and it has become the highlight of my every day. Logically, I was at first astonished by his presence at the front steps of my house because it's not every day you see a dead man, let alone one that is walking. That first time, Norman announced himself with a knock on the door, something that has now become a habit of his. Upon noticing me peering through the peephole, he started wailing on and on about wanting to apologize. I was scared, of course. Thus, I went to call the damn coppers. They didn't believe it. How could they? It was only the pleas of a man that was adjusting to the life of a widow. Surely, he was only being hysterical. And if I am, so be it. A man's duty is no one else's. No one wishes to do something that doesn't concern them after all. Still, I was scared for my life that day. As such, I grabbed a knife and hid in my living room so that Norman's pleas wouldn't reach me anymore. Yet, those damn cries that would make any man less than what they are only became louder. I could only cover my ears, but those wails, damn them, they became a part of me. I don't know how, but upon opening my eyes, Norman was already in my living room, just standing there. I slid out, and before I could say anything, Norman said the following, "Please, sir. I beg of you. Please accept my apologies. It hurts. The pain, I have felt your wife's and children's pain, and it hurts. Please forgive me. How could I? A man who starts regretting only upon facing the consequences is never one who intends to truly apologize. They are only sorry that they were caught and that they were going to be punished for it. It angers me just thinking about it. It also enraged me upon hearing it at that moment. What a joke. Sorry? I plunged my knife into him without giving it a second thought. I didn't look at his face when I did it. All I knew in that instance was that he deserved it. I stabbed him to the point of there being no more holes to be made, but that didn't stop me, as the holes were still too shallow for it to be satisfactory. It was an hour in which the excitement was comparable to the one felt in my school years, when I had to dissect a frog for biology. Each stab in turn revealed a new part of him. Something that was exciting the first few times when I did it, which only got boring when the same old process was done over and over again. Day and night, I would find myself wondering about the results I could achieve with literally anything that I held in my hand. I've also started this habit of buying things that don't provide me with any other use than those that may satiate my curiosity. As of right now, there have been over 200 items purchased just for this one goal. I can't even call it a goal or a chore, it's more or less become a hobby of mine, as nothing else provides me with the same amount of enjoyment. There's just something so satisfying in the way that he screams. The pain, the agony, oh, and the cries. These are the only honest things that come out of this putrid man's mouth, and I will never accept a liar's plea.